What is up, Fanatics? It's 8 p.m. Mountain Time, and that means another episode of Home Theater Fanatics Live. Tonight is episode 177, and we've got a pure home theater cinema-styled episode for you, right? Sometimes we talk about this weird two-channel stuff or some whatever it might be, but today is all home theater all the time. And joining us, we've got Chuck back from Trinnov. Yes, that Trinnov, the one that you always want to have in your house. Well, we get to talk about it tonight. Chuck, welcome.
Thanks, Jiles. Great to be here.
Chuck's like, oh my God, what is this guy doing?
In the home theater world.
You're like, great to be here. No, it is great to be
Yes.
here. And I'm so happy that you've joined
Absolutely.
us tonight. You guys are one of my favorite innovative companies in the home theater market, right? Because you guys are doing all the cool stuff. I mean, all the pieces and parts all work together, but some of the products that you guys make are the brains of the system, right?
Yeah.
It's the nucleus, it's the center, it's the hub of everything. So it's really, really cool. I think to kick off tonight, maybe it's good for the one or two people out there that might not know who you are specifically and what your company does, for you to talk about that just a little bit. So let everybody know who you are and why they should care.
Oh, thank you. I'm a lifer in this business, a dedicated audiophile. Started as a college student selling hi-fi at the local shop.
Awesome.
Moved to California and met Jonas Miller and Ken Kreisel, the M and the K of M&K Sound.
Mm-hmm.
Started working there. After a couple of years, I moved up. I became EVP, vice president, basically running the company as general manager day to day, while Ken was inventing speakers in his mad scientist laboratory.
Oh yeah, Ken's a great guy. I talked to him just last week.
Yeah, he's still active,
Mm-hmm.
still working on newer speaker designs. But that company eventually, unfortunately, folded. And after that, I connected with a couple of folks in Europe who had started Procella Audio, and I became a partner in that company. So I'm currently working for Procella Audio as well as for Trinnov.
That's nice.
And you see the Procella speakers behind me in my theater.
Absolutely.
So I've got a full demo theater here in Southern California. The Trinnov relationship came, I became aware of Trinnov relatively early when they brought their first home theater product, which was the Sherwood R972 receiver. I became aware of that, did some promotional work, did some marketing writing for them.
And I haven't heard Sherwood in a long time.
Yeah, it's a brand that's come and gone, I'm afraid.
Yeah.
It was a superb receiver as far as the Trinnov aspect was concerned. It wasn't terribly reliable as far as HDMI was concerned. So it was not a great success as a product, but it was, at the time, without question, the best sounding receiver in the marketplace. Anyway, I connected with the folks at Trinnov, with the principals there. Before they came to the U.S., I did a bit of consulting with Arnaud Lebry, who's the CEO, and was able to parlay that into a working relationship and part of the company. And so that's history. I'm the co-managing director of Trinnov USA, along with John Herron, who's based on the East Coast.
Awesome. That's cool. Yeah. How long has your relationship with Trinnov been now?
Well, it goes back to 2014. Actually,
Okay.
That's when the first demonstration was done of product at CEDIA.
Right on. That's cool. Yeah.
So,
And it's a unique product, and one that people have really come to appreciate. And appreciating people, let me take that segue real quick and say hi to a few people that are out there. Dan has joined us tonight. We've got Hi-Fi Haven here with us, another local Coloradian, however you want to say it. We're here in Colorado. My Mail is with us. Matt is here, and I think he is a Trinnov owner, so I think he's a customer of you guys.
Great.
We have a number of people that are coming across as Facebook user. So welcome to all of the hordes of Facebook users out there. um, welcome to the show. Brett's with us. He was with Kaleidoscape for a while, if this is the Brett that I think it is. And a bunch of other folks, Mike Galusha, another local person here in Colorado. Anyway,
Super. That's
yeah,
great.
one of the things that we've got going today here is there's a slideshow, and I've not used this functionality yet, but there's slides. Not that we're going to talk through a slideshow with you, but this is going to talk a little, help us guide the the direction. And we've talked a little bit about the company and who you are, Chuck, and those items. I think it's time maybe to jump into kind of what the meat of the conversation is going to be tonight, and that's going to be around immersive audio and then room correction technology.
Right.
We'll talk about some other things as well, but maybe to get started with immersive audio, let's define that so that people can get a feel for what that term really means.
Well, immersive audio is taking reproduced audio and adding the element of height. We're used to listening in stereo or with headphones, typically in basically a single plane of sound. What immersive audio adds is the third dimension and gives us the sense of height. And that's the way we hear sound naturally in the world. So it's going from a bit of unnatural reproduction, which works extremely well for reproducing music and watching movies. But by adding the immersive aspect, we get a more natural sense of experiencing sound for recordings that are naturally captured, in addition to what can be done with a creative mix where sounds are just placed according to the decisions made by the sound creator, the mixer, whether it's for movies or for music recordings.
Right. And in the Atmos world, that would be Dolby Atmos objects, right?
Right. The other aspects that we have with immersive sound is a higher channel count. We're going beyond 2 channels. We're going beyond 5 channels. If we have a 5.1 or 7.1, the logical step up from that would be to go to a 7.1.4, which would be 4 top channels or 4 high channels on the ceiling. We can go well beyond that. Atmos allows for up to 10 channels for top channels and the ceiling mount. The other aspect that we get into with immersive sound with 2 of the 3 major formats is that we have object-based sound. So rather than mixing sound to specific channels, specific speakers, the mixer can create a sound element and place it anywhere in the sound field, essentially using a joystick to position the sound anywhere in space. So it can be above your head, it can be off to the side, it's between speakers. And in playback, the decoder will use the speaker array that exists in that particular system, whether it's 11 channels or 30 channels, to reproduce that sound in space where the mixer wanted to place it. And of course,
I think that's a very important distinction that I think some folks don't really pick up on when they think about Atmos. So, they'll hear Dolby Atmos and they'll think that's only really referring to speakers overhead. But in reality, and correct me if I'm wrong on any of this, you could have a system that just has bed channels, meaning not height channels, and Dolby Atmos would still be able to render those objects around your room correctly, right? The processor would know where to put them at, even with the lack of the height channels. Obviously, it's better, but Atmos, you don't have to have the height to take advantages of the technology. Does that sound right?
Well, we really do want to have the height channels, but I think what you're getting at there is that there is higher resolution in that ear level plane.
Absolutely. And then there are some folks that don't have height channels for one reason or another. They're working through their upgrade to that. But those objects will still render without the height channels.
They will. It depends on whether you're using Atmos decoding. An Atmos recording will play back perfectly well on a 5.1 or 7.1 system that has, say, a legacy receiver that doesn't have Atmos decoding. But in a high channel count system, there are 24 channels available at ear level. So that
Right.
is a huge gain in terms of that lateral identification and spatial precision that you get with Atmos when you have a high number of speakers. So it's absolutely true. You do gain quite a bit at the ear level in terms of resolution of sound spatially. It's not just all about what's going up on the ceiling.
Right on. And when you talk about this type of sound, there, uh, what's the right term? A lot of different flavors. There are different companies that are creating this technology, and it's not just Atmos, right? And Trinnov supports all of the major players, correct?
Right. There are three major formats. We have Dolby Atmos, we have Dtsx and Auro 3D. We'll start with Auro 3D. I've got a slide here that shows. Go back. Um, Auro uses a different speaker arrangement than Dolby, and Dolby uses a different speaker arrangement than DTS. So we have inherent conflict in where to put the speakers.
Right.
But before we get to that, I'd like to talk a little bit about what the speaker placement requirements are for each of the formats, and that's what these slides show. So in the Auro 3D format, which is a channel-based format, it's not an object-based based format like DTSX and Atmos. So it's using discrete channels when it's mixed and when it's played back. You can see in the diagram there on the right of the slide, we have three layers of sound. The base layer is the 7.1 surround level layer, which is the same that you have with any 7.1 system. Those are basically at ear level or slightly above. Then for the left, center, right, left surround, and right surround, there is a speaker that goes directly above, ideally placed at the junction of the sidewall and the ceiling. So you have high center, high left, right, high left surround, high right surround. That's the second layer. And then on top, there's the top speaker, which sometimes is called the voice of God.
Right.
And so that is that's the speaker layout. The next slide shows the angles. It's maybe a little hard to see with the type against the black background, but basically the ear level is level 1, then at about 30 degrees up, roughly, there is the height layer, and then directly overhead at 90 degrees is the top speaker. And that's the recommended layout for Auro playback.
Yeah,
And
a lot of people really enjoy using RO for different things as well. And from a multi-channel point of view, I've heard people just rave about using the up mixer that they provide to take stereo music and play it on a multi-channel system.
exactly, we have I would say it is extremely high, 90+% acceptance rate among Trinnov owners using the Auro up mixer for listening to music, whether in stereo or 5.1 or 7.1. It is very natural sound. The Auro format was created by Wilfred van Balen, who is a professional musician. He's a concert pianist, and he founded Galaxy Studios in Belgium. So he is both a musician and a recording engineer. And so this format really reflects the values of high quality music reproduction.
Awesome. And then just a couple of minutes here, we have a bunch of new people that have joined us. Chin KC from Malaysia, a Trinnov owner across the pond is joined. So welcome. Mr. Milo's with us. Double A is joined. He's still not triple A yet, but he's getting there. We have PK Hamu 2005, and he's got a question that we'll get to when we talk about your product specifically. He's got some questions around between commercial and home theater processors. But welcome to all the folks that have just jumped in. And if you're just joining us, we've got Chuck back with us, and we're talking everything Trinnov and audio for home theater. So sorry for the interruption, but yeah, back to the Auro 3D. Yeah, it's great. And I've listened to quite a bit of stereo music upmixed, and I like it.
Yeah, I do as well. Absolutely. So the next format is DTSX, which is an object format, object-based, like Dolby Atmos. There are actually multiple layers of sound in the speaker array. There are 4 plus a fifth one that I haven't seen used yet. But you basically have your ear level array. Then there is a height layer of speakers that basically go above most of the ear level speakers. Then there are 4 top speakers, fronts and rears. And then they also, in the Dtsx format, use the top channel speaker. The fifth layer is actually a bottom layer that goes below the screen channels with a left, center, and right speaker. I'm not aware of any content that actually uses that, though.
Yeah, this is the if you want a system that uses a lot of speakers, this is the one for you.
Yeah, and
So,
and I'll add as a point of clarity, because there's some misunderstanding. There's Dtsx and Dtsx Pro.
mhm.
Those are for playback. There is no difference in terms of content. If you have a Dtsx disc where you're playing source material, say from a Kaleidoscape, for example, your playback will be determined by the capabilities of your processor or receiver. The Dtsx decoder will do up to 11.1 channels, so you can do 714 or 912, but that's the limit. You can't go beyond that. If you have a Dtsx Pro, like the Amplitude does, then you can decode up to 30 channels, limited only by the number of channels in your processor.
Right, and the altitude, for those that don't know, that's the name of the processor produced
Trinnov
by
processor,
Trinnov.
right?
Yeah, yeah, that's 30.2 channels. That's pretty awesome.
Yeah.
And that's is that 2 discrete subwoofer channels,
Well,
bass channels?
it is 2 LFE channels, correct. Once again, I'm not aware of any content where that's actually been used. It seems to be more theoretical.
Right, gotcha. Right, and then
And
here's another
here's
image of
another
the multitude of speakers
the
that you
different
can use if you
layers.
want. Yeah,
Yeah,
if you wanted to.
each ring there represents a layer, a different
So
level.
I know that everything really depends on the customer, but in your experience, when people are looking to lay out a system for DTSX, where do they kind of draw the line for DTSX Pro? Is it really just up to the individual and folks just go hog wild with it, or do you see most people falling into, we have this many channels in this kind of arrangement? Because I've not built myself specifically for DTSX Pro in my environment. I built for Atmos, right?
Mhm.
But I'm just curious if you see any kind of standards there.
Well, two thoughts. One is that most systems, really, the vast majority, are 16 channels or fewer.
Sure. Yes, that makes
So
sense.
we don't get up into the 30 channels until we get into an advanced project where someone's doing a custom design theater, and we do quite a few of those. But as a total percentage, it's still relatively small. Typically, the Atmos layout is what people think of first, and they think of the DTS layout secondarily.
Okay.
From the Trinnov perspective, however, we've spent a great deal of time and put a lot of research, testing, experimenting, and listening into establishing the most effective speaker layouts to reproduce all of the formats. So rather than saying we're going to do an Atmos format and we're not going to care about the other 2 systems, we've developed guidelines on how to place the loudspeakers so as to reproduce all 3 formats well.
Awesome.
And it is something that is published. It's available. It can be downloaded from our website, and is not something exclusive to Trinnov owners. You could apply it to people who have receivers or other processors. And it does
Right.
give guidelines on systems, relatively small number of channels, all the way up to more than 30.
Right. Yeah, and we have a number of questions coming across, talking about the comparison between these 3 different technologies. Let's talk through Atmos, and then we can
We'll
field
come back.
some of those questions, because I don't want to leave Atmos out, because it's the 90-pound, 900-pound, 1 million-pound gorilla. I don't know, a big one.
Yes, it dominates, obviously.
Yeah.
So Dolby Atmos is object-based. and it is a system that can use up to 34 channels for the home format. The cinema format can use up to 64 channels, but it's scaled down for home playback and to fit the audio content on the disc. But the Trinnov is the only processor that can support all of the channels that are available in Atmos. So
That's a lot of channels.
Yeah, and we've done a number of systems that actually go beyond that. We have a 48 extension capability to go up to 48 channels, and we've done several of those. I did one about a month ago. Did a calibration in a theater that is a 24-seat theater in a huge private residence. And
Goals. Goals.
Sorry? Yeah.
Goals.
Yeah.
That's the goal. 24-seat theater in my room.
That's it. Yeah.
That's my goal. That's a good goal.
It was spectacular.
That's awesome.
Really well. At any rate, Atmos is significant in my mind because it's expanding beyond the home theater realm in terms of movie playback. It's becoming very rapidly adopted as a music format. And you can, there's a wide variety of streaming sources for Atmos music content, Apple Music and Tidal as well. So this is growing rapidly. The number of recording studios, something that we see from our perspective on the professional side, is amazing. The number of studios that are converting. Not converting, but upgrading to add Atmos mixing capability.
Yeah, I was in California. Gosh, this has probably been 4 years ago. It was before the time of woes, and I had the opportunity to visit a number of different mixing studios, and they were all in process of either having already retrofit or upgraded, however you want to think about it, for mixing in Atmos, or we're working toward that, right? And they might have 3 bays done and 3 more bays in process. So, there are folks out there that are still Atmos doubters. I think at this point we're well beyond that, and this is a very well established technology that is not a flash in the pan, is not going anywhere. And if you've been waiting to adopt, I think there's no need to wait any longer because this technology is here to stay.
Yeah, clearly that's the case. There was a competition between the formats. It's Atmos.
Yes. Yeah, absolutely. So, as we've talked about this, some of these questions, I think they're not necessarily technical in nature, and the answers might be kind of tough, but like this one. So Dan's like, what do you feel is better, Atmos or Dtsx? So maybe you can give some thoughts about the comparison between those two specifically, and why you might want to build for one or the other. But if you do have a strong feeling of one is better than the other, I'd be interested in that as well. But it might be preference, or I'm just curious how you would pick between the two.
Well, I would start with the practical aspect that the vast majority of content is in Atmos. There is a relatively small amount of DTSX. In speaking to customers, that's a bit of frustration. People would like to see more DTSX content, but the reality is most of the content that's out there is Atmos. So that definitely creates a bias towards Atmos in terms of just the usage. In comparing the formats, they are both object-based. So in terms of the spatial aspect, they're essentially equivalent. In terms of the audio quality, they're both based on the high-res lossless format of each each codec. So you have True HD and you have HD Master for the base. So both formats are basically 24 capable of 96, although most content is 48K. with lossless playback. So I can't tell you there's a difference that I've detected in terms of audio quality. I don't think there's anything significant there. It really, the comparison, and this kind of dates back to the earliest days of comparing DTS and Dolby. It really comes down to the mix for a particular content, whether it's music or a movie. The quality that you get is going to depend on how much work the mixer put in, and if there is an active demonstration of the objects. If it's something where objects are following the action on the screen, are the sound effects matching what you see, or is it simply a case where the material is the objects are reproducing music that's simply in the background and there really isn't any activity? So you see a wide variation in terms of how the immersive aspect is being used, but I don't think I would say that there's any significant difference between the two formats.
Right. And then I think the thing that you mentioned, the point that you mentioned at the very beginning, which is the amount of content that's available. Obviously there's more content for Atmos than DTSX, and both of those have more content than RO3D. And from my understanding, I don't have any content that I can think of right now. Thinking through my entire library, I don't know of anything that has an RO3D track on it. Maybe there is, but from what I've heard, there's more content available in Europe using that standard than in the United States. Is that true?
Correct. Yeah, there are some music recordings that are some have multiple formats, so there are actually some discs where you can compare the mix for Atmos versus the mix for Aura 3D. But once again, you're listening to a different mix. It's not going to be the exact same mix, so it's a valid A/B comparison of the quality of the formats.
Yeah, I like this comment. Damien says that he's seeing his future processor upgrade by looking at the DTSX Pro diagram. Yeah, I agree. When you see that and you're like, ooh, look at all the fun that I could have. Yeah. I agree that is pretty outstanding. All right, so let's see what's next in the slides here. There's the other Atmos, and obviously Trinnov supports all of the major standards.
This is what I was talking about in terms of our guide of how to position loudspeakers to achieve the best performance for all formats. And this slide shows in a couple of diagrams and side elevation views where the speakers would be located. This would be one of those 20, nearly 30 channel systems. So it's speakers all around the 3 rows of seats that we have. And we really aren't going to see that in detail in this presentation, but it's something you can see from our guide.
Right, and that's outstanding. One comment that AA made, he said, "Goals is right." And which of us has more than 12 chairs in their theater? I do not. I have a 4-seat small theater in my basement. But if any of you out there do have 12 or more, let us all know, because we will be happy to show up at your home and demo your equipment and setup and have a good old time.
Excellent. Yes.
And I think Chuck, this takes us to our next, because hey, look, the PowerPoint tells us room correction. And so when I think of Trinnov, there are a few things that come to mind for me, right? And maybe the top 2, and you can think about this from the point of view of your marketing team, because this is a message that's come across to me at least. The outside of just the quality and the good sound and all that kind of stuff, is the support for a large channel count, but also the room correction technology, right? Is absolutely key in the secret sauce to using Trinnov, right? You can have a lot of channels, but that's only so much, right? You need it to sound good, and that's what this does.
That's at the heart of what we do. It goes back to the very earliest days of even before the company was formed, when the founders were doing some basic research into audio. They were looking for ways to fundamentally improve audio, and they concluded that the area that wasn't being addressed sufficiently was spatial audio. And we're talking about the year 2000. So we're going back, 20 years plus. And they started doing experiments with a recording system that they developed and a playback system using multiple loudspeakers. And early on, they discovered that it was one thing to have a lot of speakers, the sound comes from everywhere, but that did not produce a coherent sound field as we hear in the real world.
Right.
And they determined that what we need to do is we need to have all of the speakers singing together. We need the sound to be arriving all frequencies at the listener's ears at the same time. So we have to do corrections so that the response of all of these speakers placed all around the room at different angles to our ears are going to be time aligned. They're going to be equalized so that they all have the same response, the same timbre, and that we optimize the phase of the speakers so that everything is arriving coincidentally. And at that point, we have the creation of that seamless sound field, and the sensation of listening to multiple speakers goes away. We're just hearing natural sound in space.
So, one of the challenges that I've always faced, and I face this on a fairly small scale because, like I said before, I'm only 4 seats, but in a theater, optimally, you want the experience at each of your seating locations to be as similar as possible, right? You don't want, a person in the back row to be blown away by the bass, right? Because they're in a hot spot, and then in the front row is in a null, and they're getting nothing, right? So, does this type of technology help create that kind of consistent experience?
It helps with that. There are multiple ways to do a calibration. We can do a single point calibration, which would be for the optimal listening position. We can also do multiple point calibrations where we take into account the response at, for example, each seat. We generally take a limited number of measurements, and we are not interested in the response outside of the area where the listeners are placed.
Certainly.
Some other systems take other measurements in the room. That's not part of the optimizer approach. So we're looking at what's happening in the listening area, and the installer calibrator owner has great flexibility in terms of creating a balance and integration of the multiple measurements. So we can weigh the measurements. We can apply a weighting factor to multiple measurements to create a balance based on which seats, which speaker, or rather which microphone locations we want to use. And then we can save different combinations up to 29 presets.
Right. So you can have a preset for I'm the only one here and I want it all, to every seat is filled, and let's try and create the best experience for everybody possible. It would seem to me that the math would become staggeringly complex the more positions that you are attempting to deal with.
There's
like
a lot of
heavy
math
lift.
involved, definitely. That's why there's an Intel processor in every Trinnov unit.
Right.
That
I
is
wonder
capable.
one day if you're going to have to go toward the whole, we're going to put in 8 GPUs for all the calculations, 200 channels.
Yeah. Well, yeah, I can't say about 200 channels, but it's pretty lean. It works quite well with we can actually handle up to 64 channels.
Wow.
Not 64 discrete channels, but if someone has a lot of subwoofers or someone has tri-amplified or quad amplified speakers.
Right. Yeah. No, that's interesting too, because I know a number of people that, they're running like 5.1.4, but they are running individual amplified like on their front 3, right?
Right.
There'll be 3-way and each one is a separate channel, right?
Yeah.
So they burn that channel.
Yeah.
They go really crazy with it. And yours is one of the only platforms that really caters to that type of setup.
Yeah, we actually can do up to a 4-way active crossover on any number of channels. until you run out of channels.
Right. Then you need to upgrade to the 48 channel.
Yeah.
Is that the largest model that you carry now?
Well, actually, that's an add-on to the Altitude 32.
Okay,
So
to expand it out.
yeah, that takes it up to 48 or 64. It's essentially the outboard DAC for the additional channels.
Gotcha. Right. I understand. I understand. So let's see what our slides hold for us.
Yeah. So
Oh,
talking about our optimizer. So this is
I
the
love this.
yeah. So this is our 3D microphone, and it is a 4-element microphone designed, devised, invented by the Trinnov founders, and it actually measures the location of the speakers in 3-dimensional space. So we are looking at the azimuth and elevation of each speaker to within 1 or 2 degrees and 1 or 2 centimeters of distance. And with that, we can build a map of the loudspeakers in the room. And no other system has that capability because it doesn't have the ability to capture the information. And we can use that for a particular unique feature we have called remapping. And remapping,
This is interesting. Yeah, this is pretty cool.
this is where we are in a real world room, not a 24th seat theater built from the ground up,
Right.
where we have windows and doors and beams in the ceiling, and we can't put speakers in the exact locations we want. Remapping will use the existing speaker layout wherever we end up placing the speakers to create a phantom image like stereo imaging. If you listen to a recording in stereo and Frank Sinatra's singing and his voice is coming from right in between the speakers, it sounds like he's standing right there singing. But that's a phantom image. It's being reproduced by the left and right speakers. So using that principle and the speakers in the immersive layout, we can create a phantom image that reproduces the sound in the location where it should be reproduced if the speaker was in the correct location. So with remapping, even if your speakers are not optimally placed, you're still going to hear the mix as it was created by the sound mixer.
That's outstanding. And you know that for me, this strikes close to home because you know I find myself in I think the situation that many people find themselves that don't do a complete ground up custom build, right? You have a room and you're kind of stuck with what you got, right? Because you know you don't want to spend a ton of money to gut out and rebuild. So you have budget to put things in the room, but not a lot necessarily to rebuild the room or build something from the ground up new. And this technology helps address those challenges because for me, you know, on the left and right, I've got a door on my left, right where the front wide would go, and on the right hand side, there's an open area that goes up into a stairwell, and I just there's nowhere to put speakers. I could just set them out in the middle of the room, right, with a tower or something, but that's not aesthetically pleasing, right? So this technology is awesome.
And it really makes the Altitude processors useful for more than just the dedicated theater room. When
Right.
people have systems that are in family rooms, media rooms, all-purpose environments, it is highly effective, as well as the optimizer is in correcting the room in a situation where we can't put acoustical treatments in because of aesthetic reasons.
Right. Yeah. And so, you know, when people ask me about how to optimize sound, in general, you know, I say the things that will impact sound the most are the speakers themselves and then the room and acoustic treatments. But this type of technology really gets into that mix and is a game changer, right? Because when you find yourself with these hard limits that you can't change, I don't want to call this a band-aid, but it really helps you overcome those challenges.
It's a very powerful tool,
Right.
and
That's a great
well,
way to say it.
yeah, as we say on this slide, our correction is time based, and in order to properly correct sound in a room, it really needs to take the time element, because that is how we hear and that's how sound arrives. We have sound coming directly from the speakers, and then we have sound reflecting off the walls, off the ceiling. Most of what we hear is not coming directly from the speakers. It's coming from the room. So what the Trinnov optimizer does is it takes a surgical approach. A lot of the room correction systems, many of which work very well, tend to take more of a Band-Aid approach. They look at the response, figure what they can correct, and apply that correction and go on from there. What we're doing is looking at multiple elements of the sound and correcting for them separately. So we're looking at the direct sound, what's coming directly from the speakers, and correcting for that based on what we want to do with tuning the system. We're looking at early reflections because the speaker's next to a wall or the floor or the ceiling, and those reflections are coming slightly time delayed. We don't hear them as an echo, but they do affect how we perceive the direct sound. We're looking at the room modes as they affect the low frequencies, where we have cancellations and peaks. We're looking at the reverberant energy in the room, which is the sound as it decays. And we're also looking at the overall power response. So we're looking at each of these elements separately and applying a separate correction. And overall, we can tune the system using what are called target curves. So we can shape the response to fit a particular requirement for loudspeakers, particular requirement for the room, particular preferences for the users.
Plus 15 decibels at 10 hertz.
Well,
let's go.
If you got the horsepower and the woofer, go for it.
So let's take a couple of comments here. I want to plow through a couple of these. LBM WM3 says it's absolutely fantastic. Great information and knowledge in game processor. That's a great compliment. And a great friend of mine here, Brawlink Media, is in the house, and I agree. The Trinnov optimizer is a gift to mankind.
Thank you, Matt.
Put that upon the marketing. We are a gift to mankind. I love them.
I'll save that one.
Hi-Fi Haven says, remapping sounds awesome. That's great. And then a question. T Townsend, welcome. T Town Scott, pretty brilliant, indeed. And this isn't specifically about this, but this, IMAX Enhanced is another type of format. Have you guys decided how you're going to handle that?
It's a good question. I'm glad you brought it up. IMAX Enhanced is, first of all, it's based on Dtsx. So that's the foundation of IMAX Enhanced from an audio standpoint. IMAX Enhanced is a dedicated format. It is going to be encoded on the disc. It's going to be encoded on the streaming content. And it will give information to the audio processor and to the display. So there are specific enhancements that are done to the video, for example, and those will be communicated to the display. If there is a specific aspect ratio or a change in aspect ratio, as happens with some of the more recent movies, that will be communicated and the display will handle that automatically. Both Altitude models are capable of IMAX Enhanced, and they will automatically detect when it's IMAX Enhanced content and switch to that mode. We do want to point that there are some particular low frequency requirements because the main channels can carry some very low frequency content that might otherwise be directed to a LFE channel. So base management is a very important aspect of IMAX Enhanced playback.
So it sounds like everyone has a really good excuse to go out and purchase much more full range mains and surrounds.
That would be their argument. And then we get into the real world situations. Base management is very effective. It works very well.
It does.
But I would never stop someone from putting full range speakers in as many locations as they can.
And not that we need to get into this topic, but that was another point of education as I visited a lot of these different mixing studios, as well as some theaters, just set up solely for
Mhm.
QA, right? So they would QA
Right.
new content out. The movie theaters would come in, the companies, and they'd watch the movies and see what it was like in a commercial environment, right? Screening rooms, kind of situations. And I talked to some of the techs, and their point of view of the types of speakers that they wanted in their environment and the way they dealt with bass and that kind of thing, much different than what you hear in the normal typical home theater world, where everybody's like, cross it all over at 80 and send it all to the subwoofers. They're like, no, we want to go full range as much as possible everywhere. And it was very interesting to hear kind of another point of view on theater design.
Yeah, and it's really what they're used to working with. The sound mixers have been used to working with full range speakers, and
Hmm.
have been moving more and more towards near field monitors with subwoofers. So that has become a much larger part of sound mixing over the years. But still, their preference is to have something that has as much bass extension as possible. But I would say at some point in a domestic room, we really do need to cross over to subwoofer, preferably more
Right.
than one. Not necessarily at 80 hertz, but once you start getting below 50 hertz or 40 hertz, you're going to have challenges in getting smooth bass response in the locations where you have to place the surround speakers,
Right.
as opposed
Absolutely.
to where you can place the subwoofers.
That makes a lot of sense. And this slide, I think, addresses that, right? Powerful base management is part of
Yeah.
the setup. So, like in my small theater, I've got more subwoofers than I ought to, because they're just fun.
No,
Like
I don't.
6 of
I
them.
disagree. You should have as many as you want.
I keep thinking, how can I mount these to the ceiling, right? So wouldn't it be great to have subs in the ceiling, so get rid of
It
all the modes up there? I don't.
it it would. I'm not gonna help you install them, but,
Well,
at any rate,
when I go to some commercial theaters, and especially some of these screening rooms, you look up and, like, oh, look, they've got 6 21-inch subwoofers strapped to the ceiling up there. How cool is that?
yeah, and I've seen that in recording studios as well.
Yeah,
They've
that I
done
mean,
that.
that's again, goals,
Yeah,
personal
those
goals. So this is a topic that I wanted to touch on, because I think it's, well, for me, it's kind of a compelling tool that was put together. Maybe you can talk a little bit
yeah.
about the genesis and the use for the Dolby Atmos object viewer tool that you
So,
have.
when a, Dolby Atmos mix is being created, the sound mixer can visualize where the objects are in a 3D representation of the room. And that's something that has only existed in recording studios. Um, our our project manager for the Altitude products is a very smart guy, and he took this on as an independent project and said, we have this information. We have this information because we don't use the chipsets that other manufacturers use to do the Dolby decoding. We do all of our decoding in software because our processors have the Intel processor running our Linux operating system, and we run the full Dolby Golden code ported over into our machine.
That's awesome.
So we have the information to where the objects are located. So he devised this object viewer, which captures the location of the objects. They're shown as yellow spheres in the 3D diagram, sometimes stationary, sometimes moving. And he's added to it the location of the loudspeakers in a particular array, and those will show as black if there's no sound coming from the speaker. They'll go from green, light green to dark green to red as the level of playback goes up.
Now, and
And
the way that someone would actually see and use this tool, so this is just output over your primary display, right? So if you have a projector and a screen, it projects it up on the screen and you
well,
push a button, or is this running on a separate PC, or how do you view this?
this will have to run on a separate display.
Okay, I gotcha.
It runs on a tablet or your a PC
Okay.
or Mac. Basically, what you do is you connect to it with the Trinnov control VNC connection,
Mhm.
and then you go into one of the menus, and it's available. It's shown on the diagram that is used to configure each system. When a Trinnov processor is set up, we have to tell the processor what loudspeakers we're going to use.
Right.
And it's on this page that the object viewer is displayed.
Right. So we've got a video that I'm going to play for folks to show this in action. Now, obviously, you're listening to two channels, and this is an MKV file that's multi-channel. So if you were playing this on your home theater, you could get the full experience. So I'm not sure that the sound will come across super well, but this will give you an idea of what it looks like. And one other comment, when you watch content and you're not sure of what type of Atmos effects there are, this is a really great way to go back and say, oh man, look, I thought there was a lot of stuff going on in this scene overhead, and you can see the objects moving around up there. So it's kind of cool to be able to go back and kind of check and see what was happening in the movie. But let me see if I can add this to the stream, and I'm going to play this through, and hopefully the sound comes across okay. Yeah, I'm getting a little bit there.
Mm-hmm.
But you can see the yellow spheres moving around. Those are objects, Dolby objects, Atmos objects.
And then you can see which speakers are playing as they light up in green.
Right.
This is Dolby Atmos. Now, sound moves around you in three-dimensional space with breathtaking audio quality. It brings the on-screen action alive and immerses you in every moment.
Yeah, some of the stuff is coming through on the two channel, and some of it's not.
Yeah, you don't get the directionality, but you can also see on the screen how some of the movement is followed on the objects.
Right. And, this makes me wonder if when people mix, if they have a similar type of view and they're positioning these objects graphically like this. I've not seen a mixing station for this before.
Yeah. No, they do have this. They've got the equivalent of this.
Awesome. All right, I think we'll go ahead and cut this one.
Yeah, that's good because this runs for a little while.
Yeah, another minute and a half. I think people
idea.
Can see. Yeah. So but that's really cool. And from if you review movies, this would be a great tool to have to come in and show, hey, there's a lot of Atmos content in, at minute 13:26. So if you want to do a demo scene, this would be a great one, kind of thing. So a lot of interesting use cases for this technology.
And it'll also show you when there isn't a whole lot of activity,
that's true.
Is a disappointment in many cases.
So no such thing as too many subwoofers. Agreed. And mo subs mo better. I'm okay with that too.
Yeah.
Oh yeah, no, that's great. All right, so we're talking through topics, and I think we have plenty more to talk about, but we are about 5 minutes out. So I do want to take a few minutes to talk about the product line before we run out of time. And maybe we're not. Oh, right. There we are. We're there. So let's chat just a bit about product before we run out of time.
So we have two immersive processors, Altitude 32 and Altitude 16. The Altitude 32 is the flagship processor. It is capable of up to 32 channels of discrete rendering. We have 4 versions. There's an 8-channel if you just have a 7.1 system, 16 channels, 24 channels, and 32 channels. And it is capable of rendering high resolution audio at a native 192K at 24 bits, and is upgradable. So if you buy a smaller channel version and add speakers later on, it's very easy to upgrade in the field.
Oh, that's outstanding.
It also has massive number of inputs and outputs, has AES digital capabilities, which can be used to interface with digital amplifiers or digital speaker systems. like a Meridian system, for example, and is actually capable now with a recent software update of doing 36 channels and with an external DAC.
Right.
We have 32 DACs, up to 32 channels of DAC on board. We've added 4 more decoding channel and optimizer channel capability, but it requires an external DAC to get the additional channels. Then we have the Altitude 16, which is the most popular by a pretty wide margin. Most systems are 16 channels, as I alluded to earlier. It is in performance essentially identical to the Altitude 32, so it's really not a compromise, except for the fact that it can only do 96K for your super high-res material. It has the same software, the same DACs. It has the same operating system. So you're going to get the same performance with just the limitation that you have 16 channels. And if you add the external DACs, then you get to 20 channels total,
Right.
which has been really well received because that enables people, again, who like to have the right number of subwoofers to
Right.
do a 916 system with 4 subwoofers, all controlled by the Altitude.
Right. So that's where I find myself having issues because I run a 9.x.4 system. So that's 13 channels. And on a 13 or a 16 channel processor, I've got 3 for subs, but I've got like 6 subwoofers. And I'm like, it's just not enough. 20 channels would be perfect. Right. So I like that you added that capability because I think a lot of people find themselves, they just need a little more than 16, but they don't need 32.
And that's kind of how we got there. And I want to add for those who might be considering a purchase that this and the other software upgrades that we regularly offer, it was provided for free. They got this without having to pay anything extra. So we're all about sustainability and enhancing performance for a very long time. We have that commitment to our owners.
So I want to talk about that a little more in depth because the capability of this type of processor to be upgraded is one of the value propositions in my mind, right? It's not like you're buying, I don't know, go to Best Buy and buy something and you kind of have what you have. And when new stuff comes out, well, you have to throw that away and buy something new. This can grow with you both from a channel count, depending on the model that you purchase, but also from a feature point of view. And now, aren't the HDMI boards replaceable too if they're like HDMI version 8.2 came out down the line or something?
Yes. Yeah, they're all replaceable. And we're working on the 2.1 board that will come as a question, I'm sure. I would expect to see that around the end of the year. I can't guarantee anything with today's world of
fun times and
part
unpredictability.
availability, but that's what the goal is. Because everything is software based, it is simply a 10-minute download to get the latest upgrades.
So when someone buys this type of product, I mean, you could look at this as like a 10-year investment, right? I mean, realistically, I mean, I'm sure you guys still have product launch day models out there in production, right?
Well, of course, yeah, absolutely. And they're still being used. And serial number 1 is fully capable of all of the performance of the latest units, as long as it has the updated software. We've introduced a warranty extension program for our earliest adopters. People whose units have come out of the 5-year warranty can arrange to have their unit upgraded, where we will replace some of the internal hardware that may wear out over time and extend the warranty for another 5 years.
That's something amazing.
That is part of our commitment going forward.
Right. And, I think if you're a homeowner and you're going to be where you're going to be in that spot for a while, and you're a home theater enthusiast, I can't think of a better way to go. Right. This is likely a larger investment than you would make on some of these other brands that you can get at big box stores, but once you've got this, you've got the pinnacle, and it'll just continue to grow with you, and you don't have to worry about
Right.
what am I going to do when something new comes out? It'll be covered.
And now, if I may, I want to point out a promotion that we're running right now
Mhm.
with Kaleidoscape.
Another one of my favorite words.
Yeah, Kaleidoscape is unquestionably the highest quality for viewing movies and concerts
Mhm.
in the home, unless you're a Hollywood elite, and then you can get the direct content from the studios. But if you're not,
That's a little bit different, though.
yeah, Kaleidoscape is absolutely the reference. We use it all the time in our demonstrations, and we are running a promotion with them. So anyone who purchases an Altitude processor and a combination of Kaleidoscape gear will get free collection of movies that is curated by Trinnov. We've hand selected them, $1,000 worth of movies. And with that, you get a script that John Herron created of the best demo scenes. So basically, from day one, when you plug the machine in, because it will come preloaded from Kaleidoscape, you'll have everything you need to show off your system to your friends.
But I think I did see what I think might have been a beta version of the list of movies. I don't know if it ended up being the final version, but it was an outstanding selection. And I looked at it and I'm like, yep, that's one I use. That's one I use. That's one I use. And I thought to myself, man, I spent a lot of money on these movies.
Well, it's a great way to kick off a collection, and
Yeah.
it really comes from our experience with using all these great movies.
I like this. Brolic Media is like, yeah, hit them with the K-Scape promo.
Yeah, we want to make sure everyone's aware of that because it really is a great deal.
So the next question is, if people want to buy a unit, where do they buy it at? Because you can't go to Best Buy and get this. How do people find this and purchase it?
Well, we have a carefully selected dealer network across the country. People who are qualified to work on projects at this level. They need to have a really good understanding of high performance systems, of acoustics, how to properly design a system, how to properly install. In many cases, people are using control systems, and that requires expertise so that everything works smoothly and without problems. So we have a listing of dealers on the website, and we can certainly, we're happy to take calls from and emails from prospective customers to talk about helping them find the right dealer.
That's great. And I do want to point out that, tonight's focus was on the Altitude line and the features there, really, right? But Trinnov also produces amplification, and that's the Amplitude line.
Yeah, and this is, if I may, this is the newest product. So we have just introduced the Amplitude 16, which is a 16-channel amplifier. MSRP is $12,500. It is highly versatile because you can bridge any pair of channels to take the power output up to 800 watts. So you could, for example, have LCRs with 3 times 800 watts, and you'd still have 10 channels left over to handle other speakers in the system.
Right. This is perfect too. I mean, this, for me anyway, because, I run 13 channels, and you could take those front 3, make them big, right? And then still have power for everything. And it's in what is that, like a 4U chassis?
It's a 3U
chassis. Actually. Oh, that's tiny.
So it's extremely rack efficient.
That's, exactly. I mean, that's because I'm using this much space right now for amplification. Is ridiculous, right? That's a game changer.
Yeah. So this is we're just getting this out in the marketplace. So I wanted to make sure people are aware of it. The other amplifiers have been out for a while, but this is the new one.
Oh, another great comment. He set up his dual Amplitude 16s this week.
Oh,
that's some jealousy coming from a lot of people are like, oh my goodness.
Yeah, I haven't gotten my hands on one yet. They're all going to customers. So
well, that's a great problem to have.
Yeah.
Nothing wrong with that. And then the Amplitude 8M.
Yeah,
and Amplitude 8.
Yeah, those are 2 other 8-channel amplifiers. And we also have hi-fi gear, just to kind of round this out. The Amethyst is a preamp, and essentially it's 5 components. So it's a preamp, It's a balanced DAC. You can do two-way active crossover for biamplified speakers, or you could run it with 1 or 2 subs in mono or stereo. It's a music streamer. I didn't mention this, but I'm glad I remembered it. All of our processors are Roon ready. So they work extremely well with Roon, and that is highly recommended for me. And a substantial percentage of Altitude and Amethyst owners are using Roon for their music playback.
Right. Yeah. From my point of view, and you can take my opinions with a grain of salt, but a really great system, if folks are kind of looking for the end all be all, at least from my point of view, would be, Trinnov processor, Amplitude amplification, Kaleidoscape is your primary source for movies, then Roon as your primary transport for your digital music, and that can be files, or it can be Tidal or Qobuz or whatever else.
Exactly.
And then I also like, if I have files that I want to play back, I like to use Zapedi in the mix as well for local file playback if I have any of that stuff. So that makes a stellar system, which is just outstanding.
Exactly.
Yeah, and then you need
Fully
to buy
agree.
then you need to buy like $100,000 projector to finish it all off. But that's a different challenge for a different day.
Right.
Right on. Okay. I think we are a little over time, and we could keep going. Anything else that you want to call out, Chuck, before we call it a night?
I think we've covered it. I don't want to open up another subject.
Pandora's box.
Take another 20 minutes to cover.
Right on.
So,
well, thank you so much for joining us. I really appreciate it. Everybody in the audience, thank you so much. I know we didn't get to every question, but if you do have a question that's burning a hole in your pocket, send that to me, and I'll make sure to get that answered one way or another. I'm always happy to do that. Also, I just want to call out Odyssey. They provided these headphones that I'm wearing tonight, and anything that's large that covers up part of my head, I think is a great way for me to go. But they sound awesome. I'll be reviewing these on the channel. So if you're interested in that kind of stuff, keep your eyes peeled, because that'll be coming. Other than that, again, Chuck, thanks. And I'll see you again soon.
Welcome. Thank you.
All right. Take care, everybody.
Cheers,
See you in the next one.